Welcome to DiversiTV, Season 2. Today we are looking at neither of us claim to represent the African American community, but the mission of DiversiTV is basically to give people the mic that don't necessarily get the mic and focus the camera on people that don't necessarily get the camera either. And having lived in the community myself for a long time, and Donella seems to have been here for most of that time too.
15 years.
15 years. Wanted to basically talk about some of the experiences, because you're not from here, just like I'm not from here. And this is definitely an interesting place. So before we get into that, can we go to slide for a second and basically just talk about the mission. Toaster? No toaster?
No slide.
No slide? Oh, no Elmo. Okay.
Live TV.
Yeah, well, usually. So the DiversiTV mission is to illuminate everyday diversity issues and give the mic and the camera to those who don't always get them. And diversity is basically defined the way Lane defines diversity, which is basically the whole spectrum of human experience. So you got signal?
We got it.
All right. So let's go over the schedule. So since there's no point in reading that all over. So last week, getting a, oh. Now? There we go. Okay. Africans in America. Next week, talking with a member from the Latino community. Halloween night, the Asian community. November 7th, the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning two-spirit community. 14th, disability. And let's just hang tough there for the moment. What we'll have to do is, so our guest tonight is Donella Alston, a longtime community member. How did you come to live in Eugene?
Well, I'll try to keep it kind of short.
You don't have to. We have an hour.
I was a school teacher in South Jersey, a town called Pleasantville, which is the last stop on the mainland before you hit Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I taught there for 3 years, and I thought that the way schools were structured just were not helping the youth very much. It was a largely African American community, and there were so many things that our students needed. This is in the days before it was common to see a daycare in the school. This is the late 80s, early 90s. And so I thought, well, if I really want to be able to affect real change, I'll see if I can work with the State Board of Education. And I was pursuing that, and I had resigned my teaching position when one of my best buddies from high school, whom I was still very tight with, said, well, I am moving to Oregon. And
pronouncing it just like that.
Just like that, yeah. They really do say it that way back there. And so I'm going to leave in about a month or so. I said, well, I don't technically have a job, so I guess I'll go too. And that basically was it. So we got here Country Fair weekend, and we thought, okay, we have we've hit it. This is great. And lived in Cottage Grove for a year. Cottage Grove, yeah. It was really lovely. I mean, coming from New Jersey, and this is the side of New Jersey, we could see Manhattan from our side of Jersey. So very city, very metropolitan. To live in a place like Cottage Grove, that's what Oregon looks like to people who live around concrete and tall buildings all the time. But that, I guess, the beginning of it was really lovely, and you know, that sort of mix of your sort of cowboy culture, I guess, with your sort of hippie culture out there, and it was really nice. And then I sort of had my first taste of discrimination out there, and then I thought, okay, I think I'm gonna.
That would not be surprising from the reputation that Cottage Grove has among many African Americans here, and certainly my personal experience with Cottage Grove too.
And it's really too bad because, you know, I mean, nobody is going to shine the light as brightly upon the people that helped me figure out where the grocery store is, or the folks that were actually very welcoming when my friend and I came to the neighborhood. And I'm glad I remember those things, because the backside of that was really awful. The house that my friend and I lived in was on, I think, like about 5 acres of land, something like that. You couldn't even see it from the main road unless it was fallen, unless you looked really fast.
Yeah,
right. You know, it was really nice. And then the owners sold it, and they had been trying to sell it for years. They sold it to someone, and there were 2 houses on the property. And so Linda and I lived in the front house, and then this other fellow, he and his wife bought it. And they said, well, this is the bigger house, and we've got 2 kids, so would you all move to the back house? We said, sure. And then Linda said, okay, well, I'm going to go off and live with my boyfriend someplace. And I said, okay, well, me and my then partner were going to take over the lease. Didn't seem like it would be a big deal. The landlord said, well, to my face very plainly, we don't want to live by your kind of people. Meaning I think,
kind of people.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if he meant gay or black or mixed couple. I'm really not sure. You know, a lot of things to choose from. You know,
gay, mixed race couple. What was he?
Yeah, you know,
okay.
he didn't specify, but he said, but you've got 72 hours to move. And so this was almost exactly.
What year was this?
This was 1993.
Huh.
The summer of 1993. And you know, I didn't know I'd never been evicted from anything before. I don't think I'd even had a parking ticket.
Yeah.
You know, so it was really scary, and having to go to legal aid, and of course I've been here a year. My family is 3,000 miles away. You know, so it was really frightening.
Yeah.
So I went from there and landed here.
In Eugene.
Yeah, moved to Eugene.
And what was your experience when you got here here to Eugene, by contrast? Can we get some water? And you might want to close the outer studio door too.
Well, it was a lot less frightening for me coming from that experience. I definitely felt a little more at ease because there were more people. I didn't feel as much like I stuck out like a sore thumb. But I guess I really did, in a way. Well, in several ways, I guess. I remember one night I was walking around downtown. I don't remember if it was Eugene Celebration or what was going on, but I was downtown. I was by myself, and, you know, coming from a place where I'm used to walking around New York City at night by myself, you know, and you walk like you know where you're going, even if you're stone cold lost.
Right.
And you walk quickly and you've
Game
got
face
the face
on.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So I'm walking around Eugene like that, and this hippie guy, you know, came up to me. I had a tie-dye T-shirt on, and he said, "Hey, it's all right. You can smile," and went away. You know, I mean, he didn't, you know, come too close to me for my personal, you know, or anything like that. He's just like, "Hey, it's all right." And I thought, okay. So I think that's when I sort of let out the deep breath.
Some people, and I think you and I know what, and lots of other folks that are complected like us might know what game face means, but could you kind of explain what you mean by that? I know what MJ means when he says that. That's different. Everybody has their own game face.
True, true. What I mean by that is that you look really serious. You look like if anybody comes to mess with you, they're going to be messing with the wrong person that day. And so it's just, it's not welcoming. It's just definitely, you need to stay over there. You know, that kind of stuff. And your whole body language is definitely, because in New York City and in Philadelphia, where I also, you know, lived near when I was teaching, you never knew, you know, what kind of person was going to come up on you. And especially being a woman by yourself, you know, you just didn't know. And so it was just, you know, I mean, I could feel it. When I was in college, I went to Seton Hall University, which is in South Orange. And so I'd get on the bus outside the gates of the university and take the bus into Newark to go to Penn Station in Newark, and that was the gateway into the city. From there you could go wherever you wanted. Right. And I could almost feel it. I'd get on the bus and I'd be, wow, I'm going to go to this or that museum or what have you. And then the closer I got to Newark, the more you start to shut down and the more you start to really realize, you know, your survival depends upon whether or not someone thinks they can approach you. And you really don't necessarily want that if you're by yourself.
So do you think that, because there might be people out in our audience that might think that, well, you were just coming off of this negative experience in Cottage Grove, Eugene isn't really like that. Do you think that, how do I ask this? I guess bluntly, really.
Okay.
You had no idea of the history of this place.
No.
Before coming out here. It was just Oregon, you know, loggers, trees.
Horses.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff, and, you know.
Well, what I did know, because this is now not too long after the riots from the Rodney King episode, which I was even teaching about when I was a school teacher, and dealing with that with my largely African American kids, and what we had heard, and my family was rather alarmed because we had heard about I think he was an Ethiopian student who had been beaten and, you know,
by skinheads, killed,
yes,
right,
up in Portland, and so that's what we knew about Oregon. And so, you know, my family was literally asking me, are there any black people in Oregon? Are you sure you've got a job? Are you sure you're going to be safe? Because, you know, that made the national news. So that was the other thing, you know, that we knew. And so between that and the whole Measure 9 stuff that was going on, because I'm also a lesbian, you know, once I got here, I remember being fearful that somebody was actually going to break out the windows of my car because I had a pink triangle on a bumper sticker on the back of my car. So, you know, there were, after the blush and bloom of country fare had worn away, you know, there were some serious things to start thinking about. And I didn't think I was going to stay, but luckily the good things overshadow the bad, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I remember, and I work at the U of O in the Ethnic Studies program. This was not too long after, you know, Dr. King's Day, so everybody's back on campus. And it was one of those nice days, those rare nice days that you get then, you know. And the sun was shining and it, you know, wasn't raining, and I was thinking, wow, this is a great day. And I'm walking from my office, which is across the street from Rennie's, over to the bookstore. And the Wesley Center is across the street there, right after Rennie's. And they have a sign with a big crucifix hanging off of it. And I'm just, you know, walking, headed towards the bookstore, really having a light day. And there was a fellow standing under the sign, smoking a cigarette, and he was a white guy standing under the sign smoking a cigarette, and he sneered at me and he spit at me as I was walking to the bookstore. And this is probably, I don't know, maybe 2002, something like that. And
after 9/11.
Yeah, I think so. So could it, I think so. And so I'm walking past him, and he said, and I'll never forget it because I was absolutely blown away. He said, Martin Luther King Day. and he spit at me. And he didn't reach me with that,
Yeah.
but, you know.
But still, the boldness, this daylight,
Yeah.
it's in the university district, it's
Yeah,
right.
yeah. And I was actually really, really taken aback. And that was really like, okay, you know, you got to remember who you are and where you are. When I go home to Inglewood, and my partner and I were there some years ago, and she's also African American, and we were walking around Inglewood, and where I was raised was a black neighborhood. I mean, we had a mixture of African Americans and immigrant families and first generation, and Inglewood, New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
In Bergen County.
Okay.
And so it's a place where people will live in Inglewood but work in the city. So there's a mix of everybody there. And I never once ever had anybody shout a racial epithet at me when I walked around the streets of Inglewood.
Yeah, actually when I meant where, I mean like the cross street, the neighborhood, in case, you know.
Oh, the neighborhood, okay.
In Jersey, you know, like.
Palisades Avenue. I never,
okay, right.
And that never happened to me there.
No, right. And you wouldn't even draw a second look there?
No,
probably.
absolutely not. I mean, out here, pretty much, when other African Americans, well, you know, when you see somebody else on the street,
the nod.
you give the nod or the something, you know, an
Yeah.
acknowledgement. And I was doing that over there, and I thought, gee whiz, I'm going to have, you know, some sort of neck problem by the time I get back on the plane, because it was everyone, you know. But when I'm here, and my friends even know, if you're passing me in the car, and you want to, you know, say hey or something, you need to call my name, because if you honk, or just say hey or what have you, I'm not going to turn around, because I've had way too many experiences with people hollering negative stuff out the window. And, you know, the day is going to come where it's going to be the wrong day, and it's not going to be, you know, educated black woman who's going to try and handle this like an educated person. It's going to be the hysterical, cursing black woman who will be carted away by the police.
You got on my last nerve.
Exactly, exactly. And there's, I mean, even the fact that when things like that happen, I mean, I've been on the bus, and, you know, and I have dreadlocks, and have had people unbidden put their hands in my hair, you know, and that's an enraging violation of personal space. And rather than allowing myself to feel angry and express that anger, I think the way almost anybody else would, I always find myself taking a step back going, okay, so how are you going to handle this? Because how you handle this is going to determine a lot for whomever comes after you.
Right.
So are you going to be hysterical, or are you and that person's going to walk away saying, wow, man, black people just have filthy mouths and they are so touchy, or are you going to handle this like this is an opportunity to teach? You know, and then get angry later when you're talking to your friends, but how are you, you know, so I think that, you know, I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, we can't all just be popping off angry when somebody, you know,
or with a game
something.
face or stoic. Right?
Exactly.
Right.
You know, it would be nice if we could all just be who we are, but, you know, it's, you know, having to take that step back, I wonder if everybody does that, if people who are able to walk in whatever privilege they might have in whatever situation they might have, if they also feel that, or if they can just pop into whatever emotion they're in at the moment.
Well, I mean, you mentioned privilege, and you've already given, it's too bad we only have an hour, because, I mean, you've just given fertile ground for lots of different stuff. So I'm going to go out on a limb here, because I've had the same experience since I've locked up as well, that pretty much uniformly, the only people that walk up and touch your hair unbidden are white.
Yeah.
And it's the comments like, you know, is that, you know, how do you wash it? How do you, and you think about, okay, and how do you handle that? Because I don't know about you, but my rule is, the only people who touch my hair are like my female relatives and the people that twist up and my lover. That's it. It's like touching my pubic hair. Not that my my hairdresser touch that, but I'm just saying, no, it's personal.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's like it's a covenant, and no,
Yeah.
I try and keep it up, cover it up, but they take liberties, and it's like, and the liberties wouldn't be reciprocated. So when you talk about game face, I mean, I have that too, where in the grocery store or whatever, I mean, even though people see me or are familiar and say hi, and I have a senior moment and not remember how I know you or whatever. But I maintain like at least an arm's distance away from anybody, whether it's a bank line, a grocery line, and no, I'm serious, and you're an obstacle, not a person, and if pattern recognition gives me, that I kind of know you, I might not, but otherwise I ignore them, right? Because of some of those experiences, even though those experiences have been a long time away from me. But why people come, under what circumstances would you approach a stranger, touch their hair? You as a black person, you just like walk up to cute white woman, yeah, black man, right, right, like I do that. So how do you even feel free that that's an okay thing to do? Like,
I don't know. I mean, the only thing that I can think is that there's some subliminal, unconscious otheringness that makes someone feel as if they can do something. And it could also be that for those people that I'm remembering, that it's not that personal a thing to them, and that it wouldn't even occur to them that because their hair isn't that personal to them, and they wouldn't mind, and it's not that big of a deal.
Maybe,
But to just put your hands on someone that you really don't know, and to put your hands in someone's hair, and if your question is how do you do that, I don't know that I would want to put my hands into something that I didn't understand, I mean, and by the same token, I mean, I have met other folks of lots of races who are just amazed because there's not very many of us out here, and there's not very many African Americans locked up out here, and goodness knows, if you watch MTV or open, almost any magazine, black women seem to be blonde and straight-haired these days, so that even, there's even something within our own community that it makes it a different issue. So, maybe it's just such an alien thing. So I really don't know. But I mean, I've had people be respectful and very much, hey, my cousin has adopted an African-American child, and how do you do that with your hair? And, I mean, respectful questions, but then there have also been, of course, the spotlight shines on the people that really blow it for the rest of the folks out there. And so don't touch dreadlocks unless you know the person really well.
And ask permission first. Act like you were raised like.
So that's an interesting thing. I don't understand it.
So do you consider yourself an activist, or by default? Because you talked about the educating role. It's like all of a sudden, okay, well, why are we educating you? Because...
Well, I was kind of raised that if you have an education, it's up to you to educate. If you've got a coat that you don't need anymore, it's up to you to get that coat to your cousin or the lady down the street who's got a nephew who needs a coat. So, my mother was an activist. I mean, I remember being, gee whiz, maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, out with my brothers, knocking on doors to have petitions signed for this, that, or the other. She was born and raised in Englewood, New Jersey. That's where she died. That's where the house she grew up in, my grandfather built it. So she had a lot at stake at how Inglewood moved.
Right.
And I mean, you know, 2 city mayors came to her funeral. One past and one sitting. And I mean, so people knew her. And so I grew up with the idea that you don't just take up space on the planet, wherever you are.
You got to pay your rent.
Yeah, if you're calling that home, then you owe something to that. And if you have an education, then how can you make your education fit to that? And if you don't have an education, where you're at, how can you make that fit? You know? So do I consider myself an activist? I mean, I've known so many people who have put their lives and their bodies on the line in ways that I have not been called to do. So when I stand myself next to that, I almost have to go, no. But I mean, by being present and by speaking out and just by walking around on the planet and doing whatever it is that I can to you know, foster whatever the important issue is, be it the environment, be it, you know, civil rights, be it queer rights, whatever it is, you know, parent, you know, rights for children, you know, as a parent, you know, I end up holding a banner in one way, shape, or form. So I guess yes. I guess yes.
You claim it.
Yeah,
You
I guess
better.
I do. I guess I do. In a different way, I suppose, but yeah, I like to think that I do.
I mean, it's not so much that you have to be on the front line, I mean, but there are some subtleties, you know. In a lot of ways, I wish you were in the classroom, in, you know, in Eugene, but you know, I could understand why you aren't, for a number of reasons. But you know, I have to say, and just to disclose this, because you know, our earlier experience with video together. Right? Well, you know, because it's one thing to be given 72 hours to get kicked out of your house because of who you're with or what you look like. That's, people can understand, you know, and to be almost spat upon. Right? And then there are subtleties that seem to like happen only in Eugene, where, okay, how? So just to lay this out, right? So we were both actors in a video project. And the video project was basically a local therapist who at the time specialized in recovering from sexual abuse trauma. Okay? And so the scenario was there was a series of couples portrayed on film, and we were one of them.
We were
right?
one of them, right.
And
Because they wanted to open it up to a broader selection of couples so that it's not just for, you know, white couples or just for Asian couples. They wanted it to be, you know, open to everyone, that everyone could see themselves in this.
That's how they portrayed it to us.
Yeah, that's what I was told, yeah.
I was told the same thing. And, you know, so, you know, we did the gig and, you know, we got our checks and that was fine. But then and we were anxiously waiting for the video to come out. And I still actually have it in my library here. But come to find out that even though we were told, you know, see if this is your recollection too, that in terms of selling as a couple, that, you know, we were a couple, we were actually the most credible of all of them.
That's what she
right?
said,
That's
yeah.
what she said, but our sequence winds up on the cutting room floor. Because, you remember the reason that
I
she
don't,
said?
and because I remember you told me this just last December was the first time I learned of this, so I don't remember why.
She was not sure that she could market the video to black people because that there wasn't enough of awareness within the black community about sexual abuse or something like that.
Oh, for heaven's sake. Wow.
So, wow, okay.
So drop the project
So,
that could...
no, we were out of it. No,
Right, so
we
drop our section,
Drop
which
our
could be
section.
a reach out to
Right,
that. Oh,
right.
that's really too bad.
Yeah. So,
That's, I mean, because even if you, looking at it from the perspective of trying to show how couples, period,
Right.
interact.
Right.
And if we personified 2 people that looked more realistic couple-wise, with this program that they had to drop that. That's really sad.
Indeed. I mean, this is all after The Color Purple. I mean, so I mean, it is
Yeah, this
not
is
like
early
it's a
90s,
taboo
yeah.
subject among black folk.
Right. Yeah, we've got Oprah. We know.
got Oprah, right? We know that, right? So, you know, that kind of, I don't know, it's just ignorance. And, you know, it is in itself a form of racism. I got to call it out like that, you know? I mean, I do have some respect for the person as a therapist, but no, you got that one wrong. Okay, you did us a disservice.
Yeah, that's
So
really too
you
bad.
could have at least consulted with us before, but that didn't happen. So that's another one of those things where, you know, you can find a lot of good, you know, in Eugene, and I definitely have the reputation of being one of the complainers, but, you know, I'm still here, right? Haven't been run off yet, but, you know, there are things that you don't necessarily deal with in other places.
Yeah.
And so, all right, I mean, you did just out yourself on camera, and basically, you know, even
Well,
though,
no big deal. I mean,
you know, I mean, it is Eugene, so
Yeah.
no big deal, right?
Well,
So,
I've come to the point in my life where I just need to know if somebody's got a problem, you know, just tell me now.
right.
You know, and so I'm not closeted at all because I'm too old and too settled, you know, to get to a job.
I've worked
you know.
too hard.
Yeah, you know, to have gotten to a point where, you know, I fill out the job application, and nowadays you've got essay questions that you've
Right,
got to answer.
right,
So you spend 4 days to fill out a job application, you know, another couple days to make sure that you found every dangling participle in your resume, and then you go through a grueling interview, and to get a job that you really, really want, and to finally get there, and you've got your nameplate on the door, and you're thinking, okay, I'll have this much by retirement, and I'll buy the house in 2 years or whatever, to have someone walk into the office and make your life miserable because they just found out 2 minutes ago that I was a lesbian. You know, at that point, I'm not going anywhere, you know. So let's get it all on the table at the interview, you know, let's discuss it in open company because I'm not running away from anything, and I'm just, you know, I'm tired of it. So you'll know I'm black when you see me walking down the street, and now you know I'm a dyke. So there you go. That's basically it in a nutshell.
And that kind of plays out in interesting ways in this town, in terms of the politics, in terms of the real politics. So there was a little dust up with this last Martin Luther King celebration.
Oh, yes.
All right.
Oh, yes.
And you and I were, I guess, you know, there are, I guess there's no other way to put this, right? You know, they have their A-list Negroes.
Oh, my. Okay. I'm an A-list, okay. Oh, my.
Well, you know, it's like, okay, if there's a meeting between the African-American community and the gay and lesbian community, which is often, you know, characterized as the white gay and lesbian community, unless they think to, you know, bring in, you know, some diversity and, you know, how, in that, there's lots of ground that I guess we can mine for this, but, you know, how did you come to be at that meeting? How do you resolve some of the tension that happens between those, if we think of them as two separate communities? You know, the black community, I mean, look, you're, you know, black dyke, you're part of the black community. That, you know, no bones about it. You know, I got no problem with it, but there are people that have issues, but, you know, within our community, like, no, I'm here, you ain't getting rid of me, deal with it. Get over yourself, right? But there's often an interesting power dynamic where, you know, would you have your position, or, you know, how far can you rise, you know, in the power structure, you know, if there's a place to go, if you are out as a black lesbian as opposed to being a closeted white lesbian, or even out as a white lesbian going, you know, higher and higher in the academic hierarchy or whatever. But let's first deal with that particular meeting and the tensions thereof.
So your question, your first one was, how did I come to be there?
Yeah, how'd you come to be there?
Well, I gotten an email from Sally Sheklow,
Okay.
and she said, she invited me to a CALC meeting where everyone was going to have the chance to sort of voice just get the feelings on the table from the previous meeting that had happened, where there were members of the committee, the MLK committee, and the human rights folk, and that was a meeting that I was not at. But from my understanding, a lot of things were said that upset a lot of people on both sides of the, and there was communication that people just weren't understanding, and it was just a mess.
Yeah.
And so, Sally knows me from a long time, and asked me if I would come to this meeting, and if I would get involved in this, because she was interested in knowing, what my point of view was, and if there was any way to bridge this. I'm not sure if there were any other black queer folk involved at the time, so I'm not really. And so then I went to the CALC meeting, and then I think I got an email that asked me if I would go meet with him. And when we all met here that snowy day. And I said sure, because, if we're saying, well, first of all, I would like to have the opportunity to show the man my face, so that when you say, or when you become part of a board that is going to actively work to keep marriage rights away from gay people, I want you to remember who I am, and I want to have an opportunity to tell you face to face what that's about and what this means to me, because maybe mine is a voice that you have not heard.
Yeah.
And so that's how I got involved with it, and I was happy to be there. I really was.
Feel heard by him then?
Yes, I
Yeah.
absolutely did.
That was surprising to me, too.
Yeah, well, if you're going to go with what's painted of him on the internet,
Yeah,
the group
right.
that he was aligned with,
Right.
I wasn't expecting, and also knowing that he's a member of the clergy, I didn't know what to expect, but I was glad that he was the one who welcomed the dialogue. So yeah, I really did feel heard, because I had gone to see him speak the night before, and I thought there's no way that he can believe in these 5 principles
Right.
of equality for everyone and shut the door on this. It doesn't make sense to me. And then I also got to hear his point of view too. We got to hear that. So, I think it was a good thing. I think it was a good thing, and I think it started a dialogue in this town that we've needed to have for a long time.
Yeah. And I think it culminated, not that the work has ended, but, I don't know if you went to see Boykin the other day.
Wasn't able to go. No.
That was actually pretty good. But again, it when it almost seems, in terms of like the dichotomies, you're either chosen to be, queer or a person of color, but not necessarily both. And if you are allowed to be both, then what issues do you bring to the table or not? What issues do you raise? I find it ironic in the extreme, but pleased somewhat, that pretty much the only publication in Oregon that does something for Black History Month is just out.
Really?
Yeah. And so every time they do that, excuse me, every time they do that, it comes down to looking, they did a thing on gay marriage.
Yes.
Right? And
there's a lot of stuff, actually.
And some of the average lesbian on the street or the average gay person on the street, because that's how the slant was in Portland, right? Well, they were saying, well, gay marriage is a white issue because they ain't talking about marrying us. Yeah, we would like to have the same benefits, but we're dealing with AIDS activism. We're dealing with, like, for example, the Audre Lorde line about how come my my heterosexual son, you're crossing the street to get away from him, and we're more concerned with police brutality as well as those kind of things, more survival issues than before we can even get to marriage. And so there's other issues that are more pressing, that are more survival oriented, that you don't have to worry about, that we do.
Right.
And, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Can you comment on that?
Well, I think it's true, and I think it just adds another color to the whole argument. And it doesn't mean that that gay marriage is not important to African Americans, to African American gays. But I mean, there are other things that it's all important.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. AIDS activism, the disease is not going to ask you what color you are before it attacks you.
Yeah.
But what your ethnicity is can very well determine what quality of care you're going to get.
Right.
Or if you get any care.
Right. And my issue before this was also looking at AIDS service organizations that were dominated by white gay men, and basically we're denying services to men of color, gay men of color.
But, but to be fair,
Yeah.
the black church was not acting like, first of all, like there were black gays anyway.
Right.
Because that was a white thing.
Right.
Okay. And so then if black queers don't exist, then AIDS is not our problem. And ours was a population that has been really slammed by AIDS. So we were shooting ourselves in the foot there, and I'm glad that it's come around, finally, after way too many people.
Great of you to point that out.
Well, because it's true.
Right.
Clean your own house before you start.
Exactly. Exactly.
So yeah, a lot of work to be done.
Yeah, well, not being a member of a black church, because my standard of reference for what a black church is or should be, which is why other than a couple of black churches in town, which I haven't actually set foot in since then, I need 3 or 4 things from a black church to continue going. One of them being that you have an African American image of Jesus prominently in the pulpit. That's one. 2, you do AIDS activism. Because if you don't, I'm not down with you. So my standard of reference is like Glide Memorial, in San Francisco, that had AIDS outreach, that had, dealt openly with crack, dealt openly with, sexual abuse as part of the church service.
Right.
So I have a cousin in New York, basically, that has all those things. That's my standard. And so, we got a ways to go in terms of looking at that in Eugene, though there are some people that, some pastors in black churches here that are at least, having
the conversation.
Having the conversation, beginning the conversation. But, you're right. We definitely had that house cleaning to be able to do, and being able to have that same level of activism that we saw certainly when the epidemic first came to public attention.
Right.
But then again, so how do you look at the interface between, in terms of like skin privilege within, to the degree that there's a movement, queer movement? How do you deal with that?
I don't know that personally, I don't know that I do. Because if there's an event, a queer event that's going on that I want to go to, I'm going to go. If it's kid-friendly, I'm going to bring my African-American grandson there. So I haven't experienced any discrimination within the gay community with the different places I've been and the different things that I've done. So I don't know that I would be the person to ask. Now, that's not to say that people didn't have a problem with my being at the bar or at the dance or at the party or whatever it was. But nobody brought that to me personally, and I
would they dare, though?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you just never know, where it hits people. And then I've heard, in other places, oh, I had a friend who came up from the Southwest who was lesbian, and she's white, and she was coming up from, I don't know, New Mexico or somewhere down there, and she was saying that a lot of the gay bars that she was going to were largely Latina, and they were not happy to see a white lesbian in their bar. So she had, she had her own things going on. So, I can say that I haven't experienced any kind of aggression behind that, so I don't know.
So most of the aggression, I guess, would seem to come from the straight community, at least.
It seems, I don't know. I didn't ask the guy who spit at me what his orientation was that particular day. I think I understood where he was coming from enough,
right.
so. So I don't really know. I didn't ask.
Well, so why do you choose to live here?
I choose to live here because it's easy to be in this town. There are things that we need to work on and all sorts of stuff, but for the most part, I'd have to say, the weather is temperate, and so if you had to live outside in the park, you could probably get away with it for a certain amount of time,
Unless one of those snowy days
Unless
happens.
one of those snowy days hit, But I'd have to say that for the most part, I've been treated with an open hand. Like I said, it's not to say that there aren't fights that I've fought personally and toe to toe.
Yeah.
But I feel like if I want to, dress in my business clothes, I can walk around and I'll be in my business clothes. If I, need to throw on a tie-dye shirt and go to the grocery store, I can do that. If I need to bring my grandson with me to a board meeting, I can do that, because the women's community out here is very about supporting women in all the ways that they are.
Right.
So I think that it's a great place to be able to affect the change that one would like to see. We've come a long way since I read one of the first articles I read about Black history here. They were interviewing folks who lived here in the 30s and the 40s. And this particular woman was talking about how she lived in Portland, but she worked down here as a domestic. And she said, when you were coming on the train, if you saw that cross that was up on the butte there, that we got rid of, that's part of the history of that cross. And she said, if you saw that cross on fire, you knew not to get off the train.
Right.
And
that study that's in Knight Library.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And when, the days when the Klan used to march up and down Willamette Street every Sunday, and then when you think of the streets and the schools that are named after Klansmen that people don't necessarily know, we've come a long way since that. I don't feel like there's going to be a cross burning on my lawn, knock on wood.
Unless
Well, it doesn't mean that it couldn't be.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I'm living in La La Land about
No.
where Oregon comes from, what its origins are, how it did not want to allow African Americans in the state, and we don't even want to talk about what it did to the Native Americans that were here.
No.
So, it's not a pretty history, but I feel like by being present and by being active in all of the things that are important to me, be it spirituality, women's issues, queer issues, civil rights issues, that I make a difference, and I make where I am better for the person who's going to come behind me.
Talk a little bit about what is it like to work in the department where you work?
In the Ethnic Studies program?
Right.
It's a fabulous place to work. I think the thing that gives me the most gratification is the students of color that come through the Ethnic Studies program, that when they come through the door and they see a brown face sitting there, that, be they Native American, Asian American, Chicano, Latino, Black Americans, and even the white students as well, are able to really, they come into the office and they feel like it's a safe place.
Yeah.
They feel like they have a place on campus. And so I think it's fabulous, and the scholarship that is coming through there, the guests that we've had, the guests that we will have, the conferences that we had. We had the Future of Minority Studies conference on campus last year. So I think it's a fabulous place to affect change at the level, I mean, you know, it's education.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're at the hub of everything as far as I'm concerned. So I think it's wonderful. I'm glad we have it here, and we wouldn't have it if the students hadn't lobbied for it.
Pretty much.
So-
Ethnic studies everywhere, but definitely there. It's a result of student activism.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I don't know how much influence you or your department would have on this, but as a researcher, having read the study that you talked about, and I'm glad that it's good that you brought it up and not me, because I already have a reputation there, apparently, in any case. But what I'd like to see the U of O do is acknowledge the history and acknowledge its part in the history, because the Klan was run out of the University of Oregon in Eugene. And, you know, that's a fact that you can find if you know where to look in the library. But when you Google from the U of O website, there is no reference to the Eugene Klan at all.
Why, of course not. That's
Well,
not going to attract many teachers.
Well, well, if you've talked to any African American that was the professor that's been there for a while, and basically they've talked to all of them I've talked to with that have done exit interviews. It's like, okay, let's deal with it, and that's a step in retaining folks, because then at least you know, if in terms of this is a follow-up question for if. You know, why did you choose to live here, okay? If someone like you were going to come to live here in Eugene, what would you do to give them the 411 tip? What would you say?
Oh boy, lots of things to say, and I've done this for lots of people too. Basically, this is a wonderful place to raise a family. You know, you don't make tons and tons of money here, but things are not as expensive as they would be on the East Coast.
Right.
But you have to remember, where you are.
Yeah.
That there's not many of us here, and that there's, you know, it can feel very isolating, especially if you're coming from someplace like a San Francisco or a Philadelphia or Los Angeles. It can feel very isolating. So these are the places you can go to find people.
Yeah.
This is where you can get your hair done.
Yeah.
You know, this is where, you know, this or that event's going to happen, and this is my phone number, so call me.
Yeah.
You know, which I've done and continue to do.
Afro welcome wagon.
Yeah. I'll have to put that on a business card.
Well, we're basically somewhere like around 2 minutes. So if you've liked what you've seen here, if they could flash the slide about live class, you can email us feedback at liveclass@lanecc.edu. Put DiversiTV in the subject line, and tell us what you think. Tell us what you'd like to see. Tell us if you've liked what you've seen, and we'll continue from there. Do you have any final thoughts?
Well, I'm glad that we have this program here. I'm glad you're doing this, because it's important, and that it happens here at LCC. Education really needs to be at the forefront of not just seeing diversity as, you know, everybody holding hands around a campfire somewhere, but
Singing
really,
Kumbaya.
exactly, right? But what does diversity mean? I mean, my definition and your definition might be completely different. Any kind of state or federal definition might be completely different. So how do we take those differences and really make it a place where, you know, my children and everybody's children can be in an environment that is safe, and, you know, where I don't want my grandson to have to worry about what people are hollering outside of cars when he gets to the point where he's going to be walking around town by himself. So, you know, let's have dialogue, and let's have as many voices as we can, you know, so I'm glad to hear it, glad to be here.
I'm certainly glad that Your grandson and my daughter have kind of grown up together.
Yeah,
So
both
they
of
can
them.
share that, right?
Yeah, both
They
of
can
them.
share experiences, and I'm glad that there is a next generation to carry on.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully, we'll be here for a while, but
Yes.
Okay. So, well, it's been great having you. And I'm not sure what you thought this is going to be like, but I knew that we weren't going to have any trouble just talk storying about all the stuff that's gone on here. And I think that it's been a really great time. So thank you for being here.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. This has been DiversiTV. Tune in next week for Latino Perspective on Mark Harris. Go well, stay well.